All right, I think we're ready to go.
Yeah.
We're ready to go. Cool. Hello, everybody. Welcome to today's live stream. I know you were expecting Simon, but we've got an upgrade in Sam. Don't tell Simon I said
I like that, saying I'm not
We've even put a shirt on for you guys.
Yeah.
And apologies if my knees are all out. It is 35 degrees out there, and the short shorts had to come on, so it had to be done. Cool. So let's get into it. Today we are talking about how can we really understand what our audience care about. And we're coming at this from a perspective of not having budget to do your traditional market research. So we're kind of looking at what existing sources of information that we have in the business already can we leverage in order to gain that insight that's going to be valuable for us in doing our marketing. As because we know a lot of the businesses we work with, they certainly don't have the budgets to do that traditional level of market research. So even though we might push for it and we might feel like that's going to give us exactly what we need, it's just not feasible at all times. So why this topic matters, as I said, is people not having the budget. But in order to do marketing successfully, to market your product, you need a really clear and deep understanding of the people you're speaking to, the people you're trying to sell to. Now, whether that's product development, whether that's advertising, whether you're developing your positioning and your messaging, they all rely on understanding your audience. So when we don't have the budget, we need to look elsewhere. And we've gone through a few projects recently with clients where we found that same challenge. And we've had to get a little bit creative with how we're going to find the information that we need, which has led to us kind of having this AMA, because we have found alternative sources, which has proven very valuable. So we thought we'd share those with you guys, because not all of them are going to be applicable to everybody, but hopefully there'll be a few in there where at least a couple apply to your guys' situation, your business, what you find to have available. The way this will work is me and Sam will kind of bounce off each other, different ideas that we've come together with, different sources of information. We'll explain a little bit about that source, why it's valuable, what kind of information you might be able to pull out of that source. And we'll just kind of discuss maybe 10, 15 minutes, and then we'll often pick up the phone, look at the questions that are coming through in the WhatsApp channel, and we'll answer some of your questions on a similar topic. And just one thing finally to say before we jump into it is the benefit of actually taking this approach over doing the market research, I find, is that market research tends to be an expensive snapshot in time. So it's very valuable in that moment, but the projects are long, investment heavy, resource heavy. By the time the research is done, with the world today and how things move so quickly, it's out of date very quickly. So using these sources that we're going to talk through, it's generally living information, updated at all times, like an always on source of consumer insight. So they're actually potentially more valuable in that sense. So we'll go through them. But I've spoken a lot, so I'll hand over to Sam to get going in the first one.
Yeah, no, I think I agree with you. I think when it comes to actually investing in what we call market research, I think little and often is better than one lump investment at the start of any project. I mean, that has its place, but consumer habits, consumer behaviors change so quickly, as we all know now, that you can't really put a market research product in place and go, yeah, this is the outcome that's going to cover me for the next 5, 10 years. Really, that's the next outcome that's going to cover you for the next 5 minutes. I mean, granted, you can use it for a longer time, but things change so quickly now that I've always favoured that kind of little and often approach. Even if the outcomes are similar, you'll find that if you get nitty gritty with the data, the further you drill down into it, the kind of micro behaviours change on a monthly basis. So really important to keep it refreshed, as you say. And I think the temptation when it comes to market research is to do one big project of who are our buyers. And that really depends on many things. But the reality is there isn't one buyer, right? We all kind of chase that golden ticket of this is our ICP. But like there are billions of different people, there's billions of different buyers. So it's really hard to kind of categorize your buyers into a specific, this is who we're going after, this is what they care about, because behaviors, like people, change so quickly and are so different.
Cool, exactly that. Right, so let's jump into some of the sources that we're going to go through and what we're recommending you guys use as places to go and dig for audience information, understanding what their wants are, what their needs are, what they really care about. Sam's going to kick us off with CRM.
Yeah, so I think this is a bit of an obvious one. I hate to say it, but I think to really understand your buyers, you have to look at the buyers that are in your database. And to do that, this is kind of the main overarching purpose of the CRM. Obviously, there's the sale benefits, it's the kind of customer engagement benefits, but historical data is king here. Being able to look back on kind of the customers that you've generated, not just through marketing, but through individual channels, and being able to see how those behaviors, purchasing habits, order values change over time as well. That data is king. You can't really get any better at a kind of small business level than HubSpot, Salesforce, drilling into that and really getting an understanding of how these channels intertwined with user behavior and what does it mean for my business. So that's whenever we undertake what I'd call a small to medium-sized market research intention project, that's always the place we start. It's like, let's look at what's happened in the last 6 months, a year, 18 months, and see how customers are kind of engaging and what that means for the business now.
Yeah. And just to build on that, I think we say this to clients all the time, but it relies heavily on consistent and dedicated use of the CRM in the correct way, because having a CRM is one thing, using it effectively, keeping data up to date, data cleansing, using it as a central source of information is what will make it valuable. If you have a CRM that has gaps and has holes, you might be able to gain some information from it, but it won't be as clear and informative as it could be. You could be logging email conversations in there, chat conversations, calls, how the people have moved through the funnel, all that sort of information. If it's kept up to date, exactly
I think that's exactly it. And we're a HubSpot certified agency, and almost out of the box, it's set up for you to do this without having to do too much legwork. It's just a case of keeping that data clean. And now with kind of the AI plugins, with the Breeze agents, stuff like that that's being built into the programs, it's even easier to analyze data at scale. So you can literally ask Breeze to go and analyze all of the deals that have come from a specific source in your CRM at scale and get some really good tight insights on your customer base. So that for me is if you've got a CRM, no brainer. If you've got a CRM, you've been using it for a while, as a bare minimum, you should be conducting a kind of quarterly review of that data and go, well, how are customer behaviour is changing month over month, quarter over quarter, because otherwise you're just not really taking advantage of the data you've got at your fingertips.
Exactly. Cool. The next source is what we looked at. This is one that really came from a recent project, is RFPs. And so it might be RFPs, it might be pitch proposals, it might be RFIs, requests for information. Anything that is a document or a request from a prospect in your market asking you for a set of information. Because in that situation, what they're doing is laying bare what they care about. They've got a high risk, high reward kind of project on their hands, which is why they've gone to an RFP stage. They need to find the right partner to help them deliver this project. And in order to do that, they need to really count on the partner they're going to select. So they ask questions of the agencies or the partners they're looking for that will really mean something to them. So when you receive these RFPs or any kind of briefs that come through and they're asking you for information about yourself and your agency, the work that you do, the objectives they're trying to achieve, that's all gold in terms of them telling you directly, this is what we care about, this is what we're trying to achieve, this is the service or the product that we need and we're looking for, this is the partnership we're trying to set up. So all the information you get from those certainly leverage, and if you get them often, you can combine them, run them through an AI model, and try to select themes that kind of appear across the RFPs. But as I say, that's where I think in that situation, the audience is being its true self, it's being super honest around what it wants, what it needs. In comparison to sometimes when you do market research or you run a survey, the responses are often what they think you want to hear, or they're done quickly because they just want to get through the survey and get the reward at the end of that, usually £20 Amazon voucher. So there's not always as honest, but when it's like an RFP or a pitch, they are honestly just opening up to say, this is exactly what we need you to respond to. So it's a gold mine.
Yeah, and I think with anything, market research, whether it's desk research, first party, second party, whatever it is, I think you learn more from the losses than you do the wins anyway. Like, always ask the question, and I think we've all been guilty throughout our careers of kind of not asking the question of why did I lose?
Yeah.
And going and getting that data firsthand, I think, is invaluable. I've always said you learn more from the losses than the wins.
Yeah, I think that leads us on to that point that we've got in here around the win-loss interviews. This is not always standard practice in every business, but I've always kind of championed it. I think whenever I've spoken with sales teams or kind of the BDRs, I'm thinking, no matter whether you win or lose on a deal that's going through the system, always interview them at the end of that process and work out why you won or why you lost, because it can be open and it can be candid. If you've lost a deal, again, the conversation can be candid because you've kind of come to the end of the road, and at that point there's nothing to lose, both sides. So you can ask really honest questions and get really honest answers. And then within that, you can ask what they didn't like about your proposal or what wasn't quite the right fit, and what they did like about the company they probably ultimately went with. If it's a win situation, same situation. You're now on a positive ground and there's nothing to lose. The contract is signed, you've won the deal. Again, you can have open and honest conversations about what did you do to win that deal, what was really valuable to them. You can make a record of that. And again, the more often you do that, the more you can track themes, the more you can pick up on what really matters to the people you're speaking to. So that's also another layer that you can bring into it.
I guess a question for you on that, really. I think as marketers, we're guilty of looking for the trend, right? We want volume of data that points to a certain conclusion.
Yeah.
Stuff like RFPs, unless you're in a really privileged position where you're getting RFPs out or in every single day at high volume, like you're getting quite disparate data from those, right? Because every RFP is different, every client's different. So do you think it's enough for us to base conclusions on what our customers broadly really want from one RFP, or do you think there's almost a tendency from buyers to be, from businesses to be like, well, we need X amount of behaviour signals suggesting this for us to make this conclusion and make a meaningful change off the back?
Yeah, no, good question, very good question. So I think if you're getting limited volumes of RFPs or limited volumes of interviews actually being done for the win-loss, then in that case, I think what you need to do is take the information from those and try to test them elsewhere. So if you've got 2 RFPs in the last 6 months, that's not going to create a trend, that's not going to be enough for you to base big information on. But what you can look at is going, those 2 points are interesting. Are they showing up elsewhere? Because you could take the information from an RFP and say, is that same point being made in a win-loss conversation? Is it being made when our sales team are reaching out to people? Am I seeing this when I'm reading industry news? So you can kind of extrapolate it across other sources and then try to justify whether that point, although you only had it made once in the RFP documentation, it's also showing up in different places, and you can kind of make a judgment call of whether you feel like that is now actually a common trend that you're hearing. If you're networking as well, you can also go and speak to other people within your peer group and in your, not necessarily competitors, but just in your kind of industry, and see what are they hearing, what are they seeing, and kind of talk back and forth about what trends they're seeing, and you kind of leverage that.
I think it's also important that you weight certain perspectives differently as well. So what feedback from one potential client, in our case, the feedback from one potential client could be far less meaningful than a client who you've been dying to work with for however many years, that brings in however much revenue for the business. So I think, do you think it's fair, and do you think it's a good practice for businesses to kind of go, well, this client who I would absolutely, it's a tier 1 client for us, we would do anything in our power to win this client. Do you think feedback from them is enough to action in its own right? Or do you think you'd still favour more, there's more indicators proving that we need to go down this route, we need to be more like this, or we need to weave this into our product messaging?
Yeah.
Do you see what I mean?
Yeah, I get what you mean. And I think it will matter depending on if that's your kind of real ICP, your kind of your dream client. Is it that type of client, or is it that exact brand? Because if it's that exact brand and you've already had that decision of they're not going to work with you, then you don't need to really take it elsewhere. Unless there's another brand that's like for like, and you think, well, I'll take that feedback because I also want to work with brand B and get that done. If it's a type of company, aka it's a global enterprise of 500 million plus in revenue and a few other kind of criteria, you probably can take it from one client. Again, it's going to have to be a judgment call on whatever that feedback is. And at that point, you're probably looking at one-to-one ABM style approach of, if I'm going to target these types of companies going forward, then I will bring that in. And again, you have to test it. You go and target the next type of company very similar, take on board that feedback and see if that actually makes an impact on the next conversation. If it doesn't, then you can start to work out whether that's actually valuable. If it does, you can bring that into everyday use.
Yeah, because I think that the other flip side of that is you take a more scattergun approach, which is where you try and be everything to everyone, because a certain client's told you, oh, we want you to be this, we're looking for this certain thing from a partner. So you try and almost be this chameleon business, trying to satisfy everyone all at once. But yeah, it's interesting. I think certainly weighting certain perspectives is important, but also not being too reactive to them is also, as we said, every business is different and every business requirements will be different. So you do need some kind of volume in order to justify a meaningful business change.
Yeah, exactly that. Cool. I can see questions coming through on the WhatsApp group. I think we'll cover off a few more different sources. We don't have to go into so much detail on them, I guess, because some of them, the concept of them is probably similar to what we've already spoken about having conversations, about digging deep. So let's just roll off a few more sources and then we can get into the questions. One that I've got here is kind of product usage data or website usage data. If you're a software or tech product, being able to see in the back end what people are doing with your product, how they're using it, which parts of the product they're using most, which they're kind of ignoring, areas that maybe look like they're struggling to achieve something because they're clicking on buttons and kind of going back and not doing what they think it's going to do. That can also kind of give up some information, or it could be a signal to be like, let's go and have a little chat with these clients who are struggling to do something and see how we can help them more. Same with your website. If you've got good website tracking tools, that could obviously be Google Analytics, but it can also be kind of more recorded user journey footage. You can understand what they're trying to do on your website. How could you improve it based on what they're trying to achieve and not trying to achieve? And then on top of website stuff, it might be a site search or web chat. If you've got a search bar on your site, looking into what people are searching in there, likely they're going to be searching something they're trying to get to quickly and something that matters to them rather than having to scour the whole site. So you can glean from that. And chatbots, again, is a conversation that you can look into. It could be chatbots or it could be chatting with a live agent, but those conversations, again, will have information in there where you can start to unearth a bit more information.
Definitely.
Cool. So I think there's a few options, as I mentioned. Not all of them are going to be applicable to everybody. There's probably more sources that you can look to. And I think our challenge to you guys is to go out there and look inside your own businesses and think, what sources of information can I start to pull from? Where are our customers feeding into our business at an ongoing basis that we haven't probably leveraged as much? Your sales team, yes, they're trying to sell to people, but a large part of that is them having to ask questions to understand the audience that they're speaking to, so that all the answers that you're getting back from that you can draw from, get those transcripts. The churn exit conversation is very much similar to the win-loss. So the win-loss is going to be at a point where a prospect either wins or loses for you, but the churn exit is where an existing customer has been a customer and now they've gone. So you can start to understand what happened along that relationship where they then have decided to leave. So again, you can start doing customer retention information. So there's definitely a few places, but I think a takeaway from this is to go and look at your existing business, what tools and softwares are in place, what information sources are in place where you can really think customers are feeding into this on a regular basis. If you find that you don't have many, maybe the question then is, how can you start to? What do you need to put in place in order to start gathering this information on an ongoing basis? Because it really is valuable. And again, I said right at the very start, investing in these tools will be probably less costly and more valuable than going out and doing market research in a kind of snapshot way that's going to kind of be invalid in a year or two.
Yeah, no, I agree.
Cool. Let's pick up some questions. I will scroll through the WhatsApp chat. I'll start with the first one that came through from Beth. So it says, a lot of times it's easy enough, once you know where to look, to spot patterns of behaviour, but what's the best way to uncover why people are behaving in a certain way? I want to get the real insight behind the actions, but that feels more like a guessing game. Any tips?
It's human psychology, isn't it?
Yeah, I think so.
And it's a really tough nut to crack once you start asking why, because human behaviour is borderline mental. You oftentimes, I would say, there's not a reasonable way of rationalising why people do something, and it's a really hard question because I don't know. It is human psychology a lot of the time, and behaviours, I think, are a lot of the time we manipulate them in our own way anyway. So, like if you're looking at user behaviour on a site and how people are engaging with the content, you've created that content. Yeah. So you've got to have an intentional plan for how people are using sites, scrolling through the UX. All of this has to have some consideration behind it. And you'll find that by changing certain things that you're naturally going to influence human behaviour. So I think a lot of the time it's almost premeditated by us, people in marketing, people building the websites, people building apps, user experience. But then the level above that, which is, well, why are they looking for that product, is such a complicated question to answer. One that we would always default to, like pain point research, ICP research, stuff like that. But
it really depends on the product. It really depends on the platform.
Yeah, I think
And
you're
you'll
right.
always get to a point where it's like, well, people are just people, and it's really hard to understand.
Yeah, I think you're right. Like human psychology definitely plays it, and you get more into the scientific side of it when that happens. A few common reasons why they can often be categorized into quite broad groups, but status symbol is obviously one motivation. That's what you need to look at the motivations, and that's the why. Why do people spend £1,000 on a Louis Vuitton bag when you can get one from M&S for £40? It's status. So that's always going to be a driver for certain products, for certain situations, and it happens in B2B as well. Like if it's I've probably experienced it where I've been asked to bring in a software that's going to be our new agency management software. I want to make sure that software makes me look good. I want to have status in this agency as this was the guy who brought in this software and improved this process.
Yeah,
and now
there's a lot of overlap.
there's part of that. There's also security. People wanting to feel safe and secure. I want to bring in the right software because I want my job to be secure. I want to do a good job. So I think it's understanding a bit about human psychology in the context of business to understand what are the kind of underlying motivations. And generally you can map that back to kind of an activity that you're seeing users do, and you can make that path yourself based on the product that you're selling, the action that was taken, the audience that's made it. You can connect the dots yourself pretty easily, I think.
Yeah, it's pain or perception a lot of the time, right? And I mean perception in the means of status, because again, that one from the perspective of Louis Vuitton, that's a premeditated brand message, brand perception that Louis Vuitton has built over time. So they've almost orchestrated human psychology with that brand message there. So there's, as I said, a lot of it is premeditated. It's about the brand you're building. It's about the kind of marketing activity you're doing that's influencing human behavior, not the other way around all the time.
Yeah, for sure. But great question. I feel like we could go into that way more, and we could get really into the depth of
Give us a product and we'll think about
into
it.
psychology for business. But we're going to have to move on and go into some other questions. What are your recommendations for quick and dirty research platforms or methods? I know we've been through this with a client recently.
Yeah.
So Sam's really got some good insight on this one.
Yeah, so for one of our clients, again, we've thrown a little bit of shade at surveys, but we did a survey of their kind of ideal customer pool that they already had. So clients that were on their books had previously worked with them for a small incentive, and that was really useful. Again, it was a small scale data set, but we learned quite a lot from it in terms of what they were doing well, what they weren't doing well. Really simple questions, but a lot of meaningful kind of first party data from that. And again, if you've got a CRM, use it. Like, I can't stress how easy it is to do existing customer research within HubSpot now. Use Breeze, use the AI features, and you can get really good research outcomes really quickly as well. So for me, if you're looking to do something on the fly, I would always go look at existing historical data, try and segment it based on years and quarters, because then that will give you a good trend line over a course of time. And then if you've got a little bit more breathing room, try and do it some kind of first party. Focus groups really useful if you can get people in a room. But yeah, SurveyMonkey, stuff like that, really easy to get a survey up and running. And then we just basically distributed it through an email marketing campaign using the customer CRM anyway. So you can do a lot of it in HubSpot, is my point, if you're using HubSpot. And no doubt the same with kind of your other CRMs like Salesforce and stuff like that.
Yeah. One thing I would just make a note on, if you are trying to do a bit of a cheap and dirty process with it and you're using a survey platform that's within budget and small, just be wary of how that all works, because firstly, the people on the other end filling out these surveys are going to be rewarded for their time. Now, often they'll just be, again, as I mentioned earlier, they'll be filling out the survey to get through it, get their reward at the end. So a lot of their answers might need testing, stress testing, they might need double checking because they might have just put something to get through the survey. This is why we said at the start that your existing information, when you're pulling from sources like RFPs, briefs, your CRM, is probably more true and more accurate because people have given you that information without looking for a reward back, other than information from you, and are you the right people to work with them, which is more important. So if that's what works for you, go for it, but just be wary that you might need to take a kind of pinch of salt with the responses that you get.
I think as well, just quickly, something I've noticed a lot more from some of the software providers that we use is they'll interview new signups kind of, or like people that have just bought from them across the lifetime. So we recently started with OmniSend for one client, which is like a ESP sending platform. And I had 90 days of basically being in the platform. They then sent me an invitation for a video call with a sales rep to basically, or a customer success manager, to basically feedback on my experience of the onboarding process. And then no doubt in 90 days time, again, I'll get another interview. And over the course of that time, they're getting different insights into my perspective of the platform and the business across my life cycle. So that's really important as well. And yeah, really easy to do if you're a software provider, for sure.
Cool. What else have we got here then? Beth had an older boss who was obsessed with audience segmentation, but can you give us a bit of guidance around where it's actually useful and when it's just creating unnecessary complexity?
I love segmentation for B2C and e-commerce. Like for a lot of our clients, we simply can't hit our targets without it, right? Mm-hmm. So like having VIP buckets, having abandoned cart buckets, having, lifetime value segmentation, all of that. I think nowadays you can't really run an e-com strategy without it. And I think, if I'm honest, that overlaps with a lot of stuff at B2B level as well. Now, like the lines aren't super distinct. Mm-hmm. And I think as much as Beth's old boss sounds irritating, I think he's probably right to the extent that if you're not segmenting, you're just doing blind mass marketing to everybody, which is something that we would always try and refine.
Yeah, I think segmentation is a core part of marketing strategy in general. I think if you don't segment, there is a place maybe where you don't segment, and that's the most highest part of the funnel where you're very broad brand message out to the market. This is your brand, and your brand doesn't change by person. So that's kind of the area where you don't necessarily need to segment it. But even in that case, you will need to set boundaries on who your audience is. If you're then, once you've defined who your audience is and you do need to segment and target, I would say that it can get very granular if you're segmenting on very many layers, and suddenly the more you segment, the smaller your audience pool. Targeting a smaller audience pool becomes more expensive, sometimes less effective. Generally, the research will show that over-segmentation, over-targeting will produce poorer results. So I think segment, as long as it's going to have an influence on your message and your proposition and potentially your kind of journey for that customer. If it doesn't do those things, then maybe you're segmenting a bit too far, and maybe you don't want to kind of water down your message or break it down in such a granular way that it starts to change from the overarching message. I think segmentation definitely has a place, but I'd say don't over-segment. But you do need to segment in order to speak more directly to any given audience and make sure that audience is addressed in a way that matters most to them versus another audience. Even though your product is the same, people will use it in different ways. They will think of it at different times. They will have different purposes for that product.
I think you need to be careful of survivorship bias as well a little bit with it, where I think for a lot of businesses, segmentation means who are our best customers and let's just focus on them, right? That changes, as products evolve, as kind of behavioral trends change and the way humans interact with certain products and platforms changes. Like your best customers 5 years ago might not be your best customers now. So segmentation's the right move, but it doesn't mean just going, these are the best customers we've got, let's just focus on them. It has to be, these are our best customers, but where are the pockets that we want to expand into over time, and how can we bring them more into this kind of centralized, aligned marketing message that we're trying to push out there. So just don't focus too much on your core segments, because there's always room for growth.
Cool, perfect. What else have we got in here then? So we've got we've touched on this next question around doing market research without big shiny tools and agencies. I think we've touched on that already, but if more information on that is wanted, feel free to reach out. We can have a separate conversation purely on that point. I think we've just got one more question again from Beth. She'd love to know if we can give an example of a time when a piece of audience insight generally changed a marketing strategy or tactic we were working on, either for yourselves or for a client. And funny you say that, because we have a prepped example in our kind of documentation for this call. And again, this was kind of an inspiration for us doing this AMA for an article that we've written on our website. So we were working with, they're actually another agency, and they were going through a process of switching from a service-led proposition, service-led messaging, especially across their site and across how they talk to people. They no longer wanted to say, here's the services we offer, and they go for the market in that way. They're going industry-led. A lot of the research that we see recently is people will decide on an agency on the experience that they have in their industry. So that was kind of a big deciding factor. In order for them to do that, they had to go through quite a big repositioning and remessaging piece of work, and they brought us in to support on that. but again, didn't want to do lengthy market research. It was quite a time-specific project that kind of senior leadership really needed to get to market in this new approach ASAP. So together we had to get creative with it, and that's where we started to think, well, what do we already have that we can leverage that might provide some insight? And that's where we started pulling up. This is an agency, so you can imagine they have a bucket load of RFPs, pitch requests, pitch decks, kind of RFIs from people looking to work with them. They have a CRM that's actively used. We pulled from a wide range of sources that they already had and already kept up to date on a daily basis. And that just basically allowed us to really dig deeper into what do their audience really care about, what are they asking in the RFPs, what are they asking the agency to be able to do, and why are they asking them to be able to do it, what other objectives have they set for each project, what objectives have they set for a partnership. And it just unearthed a goldmine that we've then leveraged and worked with them on with their repositioning, and now their message is aligned to what we know their audience has asked for and requested and literally shouted at us as this is our wants and needs, versus using assumptions based on kind of guesswork or what that market, we think that market might want, or what that industry might care about, what's important in any given industry. So that is a clear example of where we've actually taken the approach we've spoken about today, because what we've spoken about is based on that work. We haven't kind of built this idea and then thought we're going to apply it. It kind of went the other way around. So that's an example, I think. And that can be applied, that was applied to a project for our clients, and we can kind of lift that now and do that with our other clients, but we also encourage businesses to kind of do that for themselves. We certainly are going to be doing that.
Yeah, we also did a pretty substantial market research brief, I want to say 18 months ago for another client, where it kind of incorporated a desk research brief, a surveying brief, and is there another part to this? I can't remember. It feels like a lifetime ago. It had at least desk research and a survey, and we found a lot of overlap between the data that was existing in HubSpot and the data that we were getting feedback from. The feedback data we were getting from this pool of existing customers that we were surveying. So that was really useful, and that formed a foundation for basically a re-messaging product, a rebrand voice project, and almost helped with NPD as well. Like the service for the clients changed quite significantly off the back of that. To be well, how do we package up our offering in a way that feels a bit more out of the box for the people that are buying? Because one of the things that we learned from it was that it wasn't, the products were being sold independently, and they weren't just bedding into kind of how clients wanted them to run for their business. So it was really useful from a point of view as well. How do we change our brand message? What do our products need to look like, and how do we take this to market? And just doing that research ticked a lot of boxes there, and we're now seeing good results off the back of it 18 months after we did the first research. So I'd say that's an example that's gone really well.
Cool, perfect. Well, I think that's all of the questions in the chat. If you do have any more, feel free to reach out. And for those who aren't watching live, if you are watching this on a kind of post-record, if you do have any questions based on what we've discussed today, again, feel free to message in the WhatsApp channel. We can answer at any time. And yeah, thank you very much, guys, for tuning in. And for me and Sam, that's
Stay cool.
Stay cool. Okay. There we go.
Nice.
Oh, so hot.